Drilling fluids touch just about everything in the drilling process. We're here to deconstruct the drilling process and drilling fluid concepts to provide a deeper understanding of our industry. In each episode, we'll share information, talk to interesting people, and maybe share a few stories along the way. Welcome to the Flowline, a production of AES Drilling Fluids, brought to you by Matt Offenbacher and Justin Gauthier.
All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Flowline. I'm here with my cup of Tim Hortons and my lovely co-host, Matt Offenbacher. Matt, how you doing this lovely morning, buddy?
I mean, it's good to be your lovely co-host, Justin Gauthier. I feel like we don't ever get to talk about you. You just spin it right out and introduce me. But,
Well,
yeah.
that's because you're the star of the show. I'm just like the guy who asks questions.
Well, now that we do video, you're the, I had a face for podcasts.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, it takes both of us, clearly. Anyway, man, summer's kicked off. Again, a little bit on the personal side. I feel like we did a bunch of episodes and then we had a couple weeks maybe break here. But how's the summer treating you so far, man? Anything fun and exciting happening?
I mean, it's, I guess we got a little bit of vacation coming up, but for the most part, it's been grinding. We had our engineering meetings out in West Texas, got to meet a lot of the engineers, which is always, our people in the field, they're what make everything happen. So it's just really cool to interact with them a little bit and, get to know a few more of them every time we go and hear where they're coming from.
Yeah.
So that was really special. And then I guess on the personal side, I think I've mentioned this before, but Lance McCullers, who's an Astros pitcher, is a part owner of a coffee shop near my house. I take my kids there all the time. They got a chance to meet him.
Yeah.
Well, he pitched on Wednesday. It was a day game, so I got to take my son.
Sweet.
And so it was really neat. Like, the guy he'd met was,
throwing
out there. Like, hey, look, he's on the field. Like, how cool is that? And
yeah.
it was a really exciting game. There were like 18 strikeouts. It was Astros
cool.
came back and won. So it was a really cool father-son little trip there.
No, that's really neat. Actually, speaking of father-son, Father's Day is coming up. And, my wife was going to try and surprise me and take me to the game, but she couldn't wait to tell me. So she got us tickets to the Astros game on Father's Day. So I am super fired up about that. I did it, I don't know, several years ago. And I don't think my son was even born. If he was, I think he was a baby. Anyway, did it, but we were way up in you could barely see. My kids thought it was kind of neat, but they were so young. I was like, I'm not about to spend a bunch of money on tickets. But, now that my son plays baseball, my daughter's big into softball, they like watching it on TV. She was like, I'm going to actually spend some money on some good tickets. So anyway, yeah, I got to go see my first game in a long time. So I'm fired up about that. So it should be fun.
Excellent. Yeah, usually my Father's Day thing is to go to Good Dog, which is this hot dog restaurant in the Heights, but it closed. So I don't really know what I'm going to do. But anyway.
No glizzies on Father's Day.
Maybe I need to go to the Astros game, I guess. I don't know.
Oh, that's great. Well, anyway, that's good to hear, Matt. Moving along onto the mud side of things, we often think drilling fluids and, what's going on downhole, but the reality is it requires a ton of product, oftentimes hauling oil-based mud or even sort of whole mud, whether it be water-based or oil-based, to the rig. And so one piece that sort of doesn't necessarily get a bunch of praise, but it's extremely critical, is just the logistics and mainly trucking involved in getting the drilling fluid product, liquid, dry, and whole mud to the rig. And so I think it'd be worth kind of, going sort of off on the trucking side of things and just kind of discussing the ins and outs of how we actually get drilling fluids to the rig. What do you think?
Yes. I mean, it's a lot of trucks. If you can't move it, you can't sell it.
Exactly. Yeah, it just doesn't appear out of thin air, right? It's just like anything on a rig, right? Everything gets hauled out there and, you have to rig it up, this, that, and the other. But logistics is a huge part of what we do. And because drilling fluids is an ongoing consumable, you're constantly moving product in and out and in and out. And, depending on, whether you're drilling one well or a pad or, the types of well you're drilling, it requires some pretty good organization and planning on the truck side. And then obviously having good partners on the trucking side is extremely important. So anyway, let's kind of break it down. Starting off, I think it'd be good to sort of get down to the basics of, what kind of trucks or what are the types of trucks that we're actually using in the drilling fluid operation?
Yes, and I mean, that's what's crazy is it's not just like, "Hey, send some stuff out." No, it's, "I need this type of truck to move this. It's only do I have one available?" Um, and so, the rundown, uh, we'll start with flatbeds. So this is probably the one you'd think of first, right? Is palletized material, totes, things that you put on the back of a flatbed truck, just like any other, you see them going down the road all the time. Um, I guess the other interesting thing with a flatbed truck is you may or may not need a forklift with it to offload.
Right.
So sometimes that can account for, so you'll send one with the load. It may also limit, one thing I don't really have in our outline that, bears mentioning is, you have a weight limit on the roadways and that sort of thing. So
Yeah.
if you have a heavy forklift, you may not be able to fill up the whole flatbed with products, because you have to leave some space to account for that weight. Um, so flatbed trucks, I think that's probably the one most people are familiar with. But the other ones that we might not think as much about, one being bulk. It's funny, I don't know why. We were talking about bulk trucks a bunch last week, and I've seen them all over the road this week, like in
Of
in
course.
Houston.
Yeah.
I guess traditionally they're used to carry, I guess around town, cement or something, right?
Yeah.
Um, but these are the big kind of, pneumatic uh, trucks. We can ship gel, let's say for a spud load, but Bayright's probably our biggest mover. Um, but you need somewhere to put it, which means you may need to take out on the old flatbed or a silo setter. You may need to bring out some silos, uh, and a blower for that matter to move this stuff.
Yeah. It'd be unfortunate to bring out bulk material and not have anywhere to put it, unless
Yes,
you're just going to dump it straight in the tanks, which probably is not going to happen.
unlikely.
But well, what if we're hauling like actual liquid mud, Matt? What are we using then?
Well, those are those big kind of tanker trucks we call vac trucks. Um, and I mean, usually that we don't send a lot of water-based mud. Never say never. We've certainly sent out kill mud and other things, things that are harder to mix at a rig location. You might mix at a water-based plant, but usually it's oil-based mud, and you need a lot of these because one, you may only be able to fit what, like 75 barrels of mud, depending on the weight in one of these. You may not be able to fill it up entirely due to weight. Um, and you basically got to transfer all that liquid over into this thing, get it down the road, come back. And if it's a couple thousand barrels of mud, this can be a lot of trucks.
Yep.
Um, yes,
That so the trucking thing, obviously with rig count where it's quite a bit lower than it has been historically. Um, I haven't heard, and again, I'm not to say it's not happening, but are you familiar with a lot of like shortage of trucks or truck drivers? Is that still something that poses an issue? And if it does, obviously Nate and his group clearly handle that and do a very good job of not creating any alarms. But it seems like we've got a pretty good handle in the current environment.
I think that well, AES in particular is very fortunate because we have partners that we've sort of grown with, right? I think
Yeah.
a few years ago, Nate made the decision, or the team made a decision that we're going to grow with a select few partners, that sort of their business depends on us and we depend on them. And we're just going to like lean into each other, which meant we had dedicated truck drivers.
Yeah.
The other thing I've learned from working with Nate I just find absolutely fascinating is our facilities, for example, if you can offload Bayrite like we can in, Kermit or Pecos or wherever in just like 10 minutes and get the truck out of the way. Because a lot of truck drivers, some are paid by a mile, so there's different ways to compensate. But if you're paid by the load, it's they like working with us because they can get their stuff loaded quickly and timely, so the truck driver isn't waiting for 4 hours.
Yeah.
Where if you had to blow off on a rail car, it might take a lot longer. But it's why we've set up these bulk terminals with high pressure transfer, that kind of thing. So um, that has enabled us, I think, to sort of be in favor. I think it's just truck drivers are hard to find.
Yeah.
If you're willing to drive all over the place, you're willing to go find a place with better money and working conditions. Um, I think we've been very fortunate, but I think it's just always something that, and you can talk to a trucking company and they'll say, yeah, we got 50 trucks. Well, how many drivers? That's been a big gotcha when we have to ask those kind of questions.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and unfortunately, we haven't quite gone to the fully automated trucking and logistics part of where we're at in the world. I know they're testing. Haven't they test drove self-driving semis
Yes.
somewheres? No, not oil field related, but just in general.
No, they have, and I mean, I think it's something that reasonably you might anticipate. I think the big question is, of course, I mean, look, the sensor technology is coming along, but the story is always like, well, it can do well on the interstate, but it's not going to drive through a neighborhood without probably hitting something,
Right.
especially in bad weather or whatever. So it may be interesting to see these distribution centers right off I-10 where a truck is like programmed to automatically get you know a certain distance and then go to a
Yeah.
distribution station. A person takes over or assists.
Right. Like you would
Um,
need someone for the last mile, but the main haul could be somewhat automated.
I mean, I think there's a good chance of that. So it will be interesting to see where that goes. Especially you think about like maybe the last place is us because lease roads and all that. Like it's the hardest place to like map out and not hit something.
Right. No, I was kind of visualizing like some automated, flatbed truck just skitzing out, trying to get onto a lease road, and then there's like a fork in the road, and you've got a tank battery, and it's going to the, I could see that being a nightmare. But anyway, yeah, we're not quite there yet, folks, but have hope, maybe in our lifetime. Let's talk about the trucks required, and mainly, because obviously for different parts of the well, and we've discussed this at great lengths, is every part of the well requires sort of a different fluid system. So let's talk about the different trucks required given, the well type or where you're at in the well.
Yes, I think, okay, so let's pretend we're doing a pad. So 3-well pad, got with one of our account managers, Nate. Thank you for not a different Nate, but, thanks for the info because I thought this was a great little breakdown. But, your first kind of at the spud load of your first well on a pad is going to be a pretty big delivery because you're kind of getting everything out there and getting ready. So, um, from the spud load, you're talking about a couple of flatbeds. You got to get those bulk tanks out there and set if they weren't, moved with the rig, which a lot of times they are. Make sure they're set safely. We have SOPs for that. It gets windy out there. There's a lot of reason under load, these things can fall over. It's a really important thing that they are set properly. Um, and then guess what? When you have your silos, you're going to want to get some bulk in them. So you might need 4 loads of barite to load up those silos. And then for your oil-based mud, you might take 15 trucks just to get that stuff out there. And so that's kind of your like big initial shipment. But what is that? On this table, I've got 23 trucks just to get set up. You get to your intermediate section on the first well. You might, need another load of products, so another flatbed, and then you get to your production section, and you may need a couple more flatbeds and a bunch more barite, depending on your mud weight and what you're going to have to do to maintain, because you're going to be building volume, that kind of thing. So,
Yeah.
Nate's sort of summary here has 32 trucks for the very first well,
Right.
with about 10 bulk deliveries, 15 vac truck deliveries, and then what do we got? 5 flatbeds. So the thing is, when you get to well 2 on the pad, you may just need to top up for your spud load, but you've already got your bulk tanks out there. You've already got your oil-based mud, all that. So
Yeah.
now you're just adding a little more product to what you already had out there. You know, bulk, a couple of flatbeds. But then when you get to well 3, let's say this is a 3-well pad, you got to send all the stuff back.
Right.
So you do your normal sort of topping up for a spud, a flatbed there, a bulk and a flatbed for your intermediate, perhaps. But then you got to send everything back. So let's pretend you go same on volume. So 15 trucks going back. Bulk, the thing is, you never want to run out of barite, right? So in all likelihood, those silos are never going to get empty.
Right.
You may not bother to top them up if you're near TD, but you're certainly not going to let them get empty, which means you're going to have to blow that barite back onto a truck, get it out of there. And then, flatbeds and bulk tanks, And once again, some of this stuff may just move with the rig if you're just going to another pad location and you still have that work.
Yeah.
But that's another 30 trucks for well 3. And so Nate's little summary has 63, 74 loads for 3 wells.
Right. No, the volume of trucks again is just something that I don't think most people think about. And I mean, keep in mind, like this varies, right? This is
Of
just like a
course.
typical well, and some averages that Nate might have put together. But the reality is if you have a 3 well pad, or the first well and the last well are always going to have the most. But you can just see here, you mentioned 70 something truckloads. That's a lot of hauling. It's a lot of driving. It's a lot of hours, and so again, there's a pretty heavy cost associated with just getting the product before you even cut a sack open.
Yes. And I mean, I think, the other flip side of this is you think about, oh, if I can use water-based mode in the production section, think of how many trucks. I'd probably cut my trucking in half,
Right.
So like some of the savings can be pretty significant if you're able to, switch it around a bit.
Yeah.
So I guess, that's obviously nothing set in stone, but that's a pretty reasonable estimate. It sounds like a lot.
Yeah.
The thing I think you got to talk about is if you're trusting all of these trucks, all these miles driven, yes, people are looking to save money, but an expensive thing is not having things when you need them, or an incident happening, or something like that could be really bad for the whole for everybody, for the whole operation. So
Right.
the flip side of that is, of course, what's worth paying for? What makes a good trucking company?
Yeah. No, I think well, I think we have to focus primarily on safety.
Yeah.
I think that, you know, I'm it's the reality, and then sad to say, is that I think everyone is aware of some accident that's happened in the oil field regarding trucking. And it can be dangerous being out there. I mean, especially with the amount of hours and miles, like we said. So I think first and foremost, when you're vetting or looking at any logistics companies, what does their safety record look like? Again, I can't stress that one even more. But besides that one, Matt, what would be one thing besides safety that you would kind of key in on?
I mean, being on time. It sounds silly, but there are times when a truck driver picks up a load and doesn't show up for 8, 12 hours later. Where are you? What's going on?
Yeah.
And so I think just, look, if it takes this long to get from point A to point B safely and there's no adverse conditions, you should be there in that period of time. And if you can't, somebody should know about it.
Yeah.
So I think there have been situations where people are looking for a truck driver, trying to find out he pulled over to go to sleep. Like,
Yeah. I think that comes down to just like anything in the oil field is communication. As a mud engineer, there was nothing more frustrating than having dispatch say, "Oh yeah, it'll be there by 6," and then next thing you know, it's 8:30, 9 o'clock. No one's called. All of a sudden, coming representatives are frustrated, rightfully so, because we're waiting on something. And then it was as simple as, "Oh, the truck driver, had a flat, and so he's changing." So, well, why did no one notify me? So I think safety first, obviously, and then communication.
yes, I have a great story, or at least I think it's funny. So one of the first wells I worked on was on my own, was outside Opelousas, Louisiana.
Okay.
And I had to call, there's a warehouse in like Port Barry or something. Like I never even heard of the place, but that's where I needed to order product out of. And it was a water-based job, and I could not understand the guy on the other end of the line. Like total, like, it reminds me of the Water Boy. That guy that like no one can understand. Yeah, but it would be like, I would just call up and hey, so could I get this, and call out my order, and there'd be this sort of like, and I was just like, and so I'd repeat like, okay, so I can expect 4 pallets of gel, and like, and then like, and like, you could tell he was laughing, like kind of jolly guy, and then like I'd hang up and I'd just be like, please show up.
Right.
Please show. Like I had no idea of like how to follow up on any of this. And so every load, it would just be like, yay, it's here.
Right. Meanwhile, yeah, you have no idea what the gentleman said. But you're like, yeah, fingers crossed. If it comes, whatever he said was perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was just, it was one of those that think, like, it's so nice now. We have our system where It's like Amazon. You log into the sales portal, you put in what you want, you click when you want it, and it says, okay, your order is being processed.
Yep. Yep.
Um,
No, that's yeah, that's a good story. And I think everyone as a mud engineer has had that sort of just hurry up and wait and hopefully it comes on time. And speaking of that, and again, it's been a few years since I've been in the field, but I just think it would be neat. And I know there's technology out there. Was like, let's say you make an order and you've got an app, whether it's tied into our system or whatever, but you can sort of track through satellite where the vehicle is. Like, a lot of families have, and we don't track, but a lot of families have these apps that you can track the vehicle and where your like kid is or whatever like that. I just think it makes so much sense to have like, oh, here's your truck, here's the driver's name, almost like Uber. When you go on the Uber app and you can see and you can message a deal. Obviously the driver shouldn't be texting and driving, but I just find it odd that there's just not a tracking system to exactly where the truck is and when to expect it. I feel like that should have been happening a long time ago.
I think, well, I mean, there are systems that'll do that. I think part of it is depending on which partner and that sort of thing. There's some crossover. I think they know where the trucks are, and so but we still have to communicate with them.
Yeah.
But I know that there's notifications sent out when they've left the yard, so you at least know, okay, warehouse is this far away. But yeah, I think that stuff. If it's there may be some ways on the software side to streamline that. Just it's always hard, I guess, too, for the trucking companies. If they don't exclusively work for you, like, hey, which will load is like, if I'm a dispatcher, it's like it's just going to that rig. I don't care, you know. But anyways, yeah, technology has come a long way, and hopefully will bring us even further.
Yeah. I think, and then too is another one is just a clean setup. Having a clean trucks, obviously well maintained. When something comes up on location, you can generally tell if they take care of their trucks, and they take pride in their trucks, or if it's just they're just running them into the dirt and just trying to get as many loads as possible without you know cleaning and well maintaining the trucks.
Yeah, I mean, and I would say just sort of like cleanliness as a broader theme where a couple of things come to mind. One is they're clean, they're organized and prepared. So I just remember, we don't do fuel, but like a fuel truck came up on location. It was a guy who clearly had never been on a rig before. So I was out there, I helped him fill out the JSA. We went over some things, checked in with the company man, all that kind of stuff. And then he didn't have the right fitting for his hose to go into the diesel tank. And it was one of these like, buddy, next time have two of everything. Like, don't leave the yard without two of everything, because you could have just been stranded out here and not been able to offload
Yeah.
until somebody showed up with a fitting. And in fact, the one of the rig hands, we went and yanked one off of a tank. The valve was closed or whatever. Yanked that off and connected it to him, offloaded, and then put it back. But it was, and I think also just broader clean setup. Show up on location and like, where are you setting these pallets? How are you handling, like, are you setting everything down in an organized manner? I mean, this is where like working with a mud engineer helps, but you can tell a good truck driver with how much care that, where do you want this? What should I move? So that it's not just like all the chemicals that isn't used stays in the back. I mean, it takes work to move put the new stuff in the back and put the other stuff in the front, but with certain products that kind of go from well to well to well, that matters.
No, most
Um,
definitely.
And so I think just being conscientious of that stuff is a big thing for, showing a truck driver who cares.
Hmm.
So yeah.
Okay. Well, on the flip side, obviously mud engineers play a big role in the logistics piece. What can mud engineers do to help support, the trucking companies or just trucking in general?
I mean, I think a big thing is communicate. It is hard. Um, you got to get up and get out of the trailer and work with the truck driver when they arrive. And we mentioned there's a ton of these trucks, right? Like you take a lot of deliveries.
Yeah.
And if you're a mud engineer, you're probably trying to sleep whenever you can. You've got other things to look after. When a truck shows up, communicate with the driver. Tell them what you want. I mean, a lot of them don't care. They just want to get out of there. So if you would help them clear their paperwork and get everything taken care of, like, it helps everybody. But but there's a reason to believe, they can do it on their own. They see where the pallets are. So I think communicating, directing traffic, saying, hey, this is where I would like this stuff. Especially if you've got a plan where it's like, okay, this is where I keep these things. LCMs go over here. They don't know what any of this stuff is. But if you can tell them, look, these totes go over here, that's better, more accessible for the forklift, those kinds of things. It's going to make everybody's life easier.
Right.
I think if you do have returns, letting them know before they come out there so they know they've got to, grab stuff. And then, going back to the communication, like, everybody wants their stuff ASAP, but do you really need it ASAP, or be like, man, if you could show up anytime after 6 and, if you want to time this out, like, that would help me. Then I think that's just really useful for a trucking company that's managing a bunch of trucks. It reminds me of when you ask our mud plant coordinator, like, hey, how long does it take to mix 1,000 barrels of mud? And they're like, are you on well control? Because they want to know, they want the time to do it with every other order they have.
Yeah.
But if they know it's urgent, you're going to get priority.
Right.
In the same way on the trucking, okay, everybody put ASAP. Are they all ASAP, or if you had it in 4 hours, would that, suffice? So just sort of defining that level of urgency and giving as much notice as you can.
Yeah. No, a mud engineer who's very well organized, who can plan and communicate, makes everyone's lives a lot easier. And it's funny you say everyone puts ASAP load. I think it's true, but to your point, the reality is there's some that are and some that aren't. But if everyone does the same thing, then the warehouse doesn't know how to properly prioritize. So be mindful of that as a mud engineer. Be realistic and plan your business. At the end of the day, is don't sort of be reactive. Try and be as proactive as possible, especially in the logistics front. It can make a world of difference for everybody on location and at the warehouse. Anything else, Matt?
Man, I think I'm sure there's more. Hopefully the listeners will speed us up, but I do think that, logistics matter so much. And maybe we take it a little more for granted. Like, talking to somebody, you work offshore or deep water, and it's like, look, the boat's either there or it's not. And so, the intensity is it feels a little bit greater. But at the same time, there's so many moving parts in these scenarios, and being ready for those. I don't think land is getting trucks. Yeah, it's probably a little more straightforward, but the sheer volume of them and the good truck drivers, the safe drivers, that's pretty, it's a pretty special skill if you can nail it down and do a good job.
Yeah. No, and a big shout out to all the trucking companies who work with us, who work closely with us, and just support us each and every single day, because we couldn't do it without you guys. With that being said, everyone, please review the podcast, or if you have any comments on this episode, please reach out to us on LinkedIn, or you can hit us at the Flowline podcast at aesfluids.com. If you have any ideas for a show, reach out to us as well. Be sure to connect with us on LinkedIn, the AES Fluids page, and also YouTube. Check out the new website. I don't say it's new anymore, but I feel like it's continuously being polished and updated with great information on what we're doing, and obviously our products and systems. And with that being said, everyone, take care, enjoy the summer heat, and until next time,
take care.
Thanks for listening. Please tune in next week for another exciting episode of the Flowline. And remember, may your returns always be full and your trips always smooth. Views expressed in this program belong to participants and not their employees. The program is for informational purposes only and cannot take the place of seeking professional advice. Copyright AES Drilling Fluids.